What's up, everybody? We are back. John Delarose here, the leading Hispanic voice in science fiction. You probably realized when I was doing Supergirl, or the Daring New Adventures of Supergirl, that is, Volume 1, that I would probably end up doing Volume 2 also. This is it right here. It is by Paul Kupperberg and Carmine Infantino. And remarkably consistent. The art stays the same across this entire series. Writer stays the same across this entire series. Makes me very happy. I love consistency in a book. And this covers issues 13 to 23, whereas the first volume did 1 through 12. All right. We dive right into the first storyline here. And our gal changes her costume. She had a really cool costume that was very different in the first one. And it was very 70s, of course. And she doesn't keep with the, sort of Superman look exactly, but has this sort of S attached to her cape, as it is here, and gets back into the Supergirl skirt and boots. And there we go. So Supergirl unveils her costume to Superman, very cute, and she also unveils the events of the last few issues. So if you wanted to catch up, I love this about old comics, that you get a couple pages of catch up, and you are back into the whole situation. Now Supergirl goes and visits her parents, and this kind of goes back into the way that she got the costume in the first place. And I actually like that. I like that her mom designed the costume and she whipped it up and was able to... She's a super seamstress. Very nice character moments. Very fun character work right here, which was very enjoyable. When she gets back into town, there's her boyfriend. He's a conductor at the Chicago Symphony or whatnot. And he's always got some weird... He's developing here that he's got some, weird, I have to go, and she doesn't know why. And of course, that happens similarly with Supergirl. So it's a conundrum for her as her boyfriend's hiding secrets from her, and she's hiding secrets from her boyfriend. The type of plot line I really like, of course, for obvious reasons. Then we get into the plot line. There's this rally of social something change front or something, which is supposed to be an allegory for neo-Nazis and stuff like that. And this is interesting, and I was quite immediately starting to roll my eyes a little bit at the literal Nazis being the bad guys, right? And there's a rally where this gal is leading it, and this guy comes up and gets the crowd riled up and saying, I'm a Jew and you're gonna deal with this. And it starts a whole fight in the rally. Now where it gets interesting is actually that was planned from the start, and the guy who was rabble-rousing was just rabble-rousing to start things up. And it turns out this gal has this almost Marvel cloak. I guess this came before Marvel's cloak. But she's got a weird cloak where she's got the power of the galaxy inside of it. And so she's a real match for Supergirl. And she's been giving these angry speeches. Pretty funny. This is very Comics Code E. So even though they wanted to do this plot line, they don't actually... And they comment about how the speech is so racist and all that. But the lady doesn't actually say anything racist because... they probably couldn't do that with the Comics Code, is I'm guessing what happened. And so it's kind of very innuendo-y, and it says, "Look neither to institutions of faith, they have been deceived. Who then is our enemy? I needn't tell you that. You do not need to hear the words from my lips to know the truth." So it's they never actually explicitly say what she's advocating for. So that's very interesting right there. And it gets into this. We have Black Star, a Nazi, a literal Nazi. And this is where the storyline gets interesting, because it's not what you expect. Look at this beautiful art. I love this big double page spread here. Very cool. So you expect it to be very black and white for, in terms of the morality involved here, and of course the Nazis are the bad guys, and etc. This lady here is Supergirl's landlord, and it turns out that the landlord got a swastika on her wall or whatnot, and she's really upset about that. She's really upset about these rallies and all that happening. And then it turns out that the Black Star girl, who is the literal Nazi villain, is actually her daughter. So it adds a weird layer of difference to it, because I mean, obviously, if the mom is Jewish, then she ends up being Jewish and a Nazi or whatnot. So that's it twists it a little bit on its head, which makes for a more interesting storyline, in my opinion. So, the gal goes after a rabbi, and then Supergirl fights her, and the mom shows up at this point in the middle of the fight between Supergirl and this other gal. And Supergirl does pretty well with her. The mom tries to break up the fight and says, "Hey, we need to stop this fighting," and blah 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 blah. And we get into the past with what happened here, and the girl feels like the mom abandoned her, and that's where she's getting her weird hatred from, because she felt like she was abandoned, and that makes for a much more interesting storyline than I thought this was going to end up being. Because abandonment like that, of course, and feeling alone will definitely fuel hatred and fuel people in these sorts of situations. It made for a very compelling villain where I thought I was not going to get one. So Paul Kupperberg did a great job with this. We get a break in the action to where we get into Kara working with her. I'm sorry, Linda Kara, whatever you want to call her, working with her psych professor. She's working as his secretary or whatnot, and he's going to be making a book, and she's going to type up the book for him, is how it's going to go. And that plot line blows up pretty good, too. Lots of good sequential storytelling where we get that serialized build where the plot lines build off of one another, and we get a couple pages here and there until the plot lines fully unfold. Very enjoyable stuff. This is like a primer on how to write comics. And eventually, Supergirl gets sucked into this weird dimension, and then turns the girl's powers against her. Very weird resolution, because I expected a more personal resolution with the mom and Black Star, maybe coming to terms or something like that. But the mom really just loses out here as the daughters, get sucked into a weird dimension, and Supergirl, saves the day. We get a sort of lighthearted break now, because that was a pretty heavy 3 issues, right, for what this is. And we get this character named Ambush Bug, who shows up in this one. I guess he's a Superman character. I don't know anything about him before this. But he just pops in, and he's just bad at being a hero, even though he's trying. And he actually mistakes Supergirl for Superman at first, which is pretty funny. Lots of humor in this issue. And they end up solving a crime together, but Ambush Bug causes so many problems he gets arrested too, which he should, because he's absolutely crazy. But here's the thing, is he learns Supergirl's secret identity over this issue. Very fun issue. I love the art. I love Carmine Infantino. It's just like the way he draws figures, just so good. This is classic cartooning look at its finest. Okay. Now, in this one, Supergirl is dealing with... Which issue is this? So many issues in these things. Dealing with a personal crisis here a little bit, as her psychology professor gets kidnapped, and it returns to... This is a major villain from the first one, a big robot called Matrix Prime. Comes back for another fight. Who these guys who... they were called the council in the first issue. Now it's kind of down to one guy who's in charge of things, and he's like a mob boss. And it turns out that the psychology professor was writing books about him, and that's what kind of spurs him into doing his thing. Now Supergirl rescues him, and there's a very thin thing here where Linda Danvers, not Carol Danvers, jeez. So many names, and they're all so similar. Shows up at the mob boss's island, and then she takes off her wig, and she's like, "I'm Supergirl." And then she tells the psychology professor that she was just pretending to be Linda Danvers, and the psychology professor somehow just totally buys it. Very, very weird secret identity thing right here, which is not exactly believable. And then Supergirl changes her hair at the end of this to look more 80s. So she's got that like kind of the girl mullet at this point, which is pretty funny. I love the way she looked before, and I'm kind of sad that they switched that. Oh well, what can you do? Got to get the 80s girl mullet. Girl mullet. Okay, so next issue is a less personal tale, finally. And there's this kraken in the water, or at least an alien being who's causing all sorts of problems for different ships and planes and stuff like that. And Supergirl has to fight this creature underwater, and that's it. And it turns out that there's a little bit of a twist in this also, and she kind of changes his perspective on things, and that's it. So you never see that character again. That's the end of that. And then we get a, wait, I'm Supergirl, you're Supergirl. This is a really neat issue, and I really love what they did here. They brought back, so what happened in the earlier ones was that council, they had an evil mad scientist who made mini clones of Supergirl, and they made 6 mini clones of Supergirl. And this is like over the top, and like, you know, of course, suspension of disbelief is difficult here. But but you end up being in Linda Danvers' life, and she's watching Supergirl on TV, and she's like, what's going on? And it turns out the person you've been reading the perspective of the entire time is not actually the real Supergirl. She is the merged clones together who actually attempted to usurp her life, erased memories intentionally, and Supergirl figures it out in this, and then ends up having to deal with this fake Danvers. And there's not a ton of action in it because like this girl doesn't have her powers in this, but it ends with her being like, you know what, you can have your own life. We're going to set you up with a life, and you know, you deserve a life as well, and we can be friends. And it resolves what happens with those clones, because it was really interesting to me what would happen with those clones. Like, because I was sitting there thinking, are they alive? Does Supergirl kill them? Like, what happens with those clones? Because that's kind of like a gruesome deal, and I'm glad that they resolved that. That this makes me very happy. This was done very heroically, and is a good storyline. Very fun. And then we get this is a special anniversary issue, and I guess this is the anniversary of when she first appeared as Supergirl in the old school comics. And so it's kind of the Justice League shows up, and all the characters show up, and they fight this bad guy. But she gets to here's all the characters guest starring. And they're like, hey, you're great, Supergirl, and they make a statue of her. So pretty neat. It's probably the least impactful issue out of the whole series, but you know, probably at the time when it was an actual anniversary, it was pretty neat. Okay, so Superman continues to appear in this one, and we do get a guest artist. I'm sorry, I thought we had Carmine Infantino the whole way through, but I guess I'm wrong. And this guy does a good job. We have a man made out of kryptonite, and Kara and Cal have to fight him together. So very enjoyable. I love watching her interact with Superman. Again, just like a solid comic story, and the way they resolve it is really good. So that is a wonderful thing. And then we kind of get back into her main plot again, and that was a fill-in issue. And Carmine Infantino comes back. You don't have a ton of personal character development in that one. But the big personal development thing that's been happening is that her boyfriend has been getting more and more mysterious. She finds out that he's actually not where he says he's going to be. And what's interesting about Supergirl is morally she refuses to use her powers to spy on her friends. And I like that. I wish, you know, our modern government would refuse to use its power to spy on its citizens. I think there's a good moral to that story. But what can you do? And what also develops again is this whole conspiracy that's going on in there. And because the psychology professor has been building up these weird secrets this entire time, also, it turns out that he has been brainwashing himself while he sleeps every night. Because he's unleashed this like evolutionary power, and he becomes this like evil, brilliant monster. Very fun storyline, and of course, Supergirl has to fight him and stop him from doing this, and she has to do it in a way that like can save her professor, because on the personal level, she can save her professor. Now, what's interesting to me is that, of course, the most brilliant man ever in a evolutionary mindset still doesn't figure out the connection between her and her secret identity, even after that whole bizarre situation a couple issues ago. We also get a weird romance plot showing up where this guy shows up, and I don't know if he's from other issues or anything like that, because he's never referenced in this series, and I haven't read any of the stuff before this. But the guy's name, I can't remember the name. Where is it? Richard Malvern. So somebody could probably tell me about his history in the DC universe if he exists other than this. I'm sure. Leave that in the comments down below. Make sure to hit that like and subscribe button while you're at it. And of course, we resolve the main issue here. Now, Supergirl gets really mad at her boyfriend, and he tries to come see her, but she's not there. She's broken up with him and told him to never call her again at this point, because he has been hiding secrets from her. And she feels bad about it because she, of course, disappears all the time as Supergirl, so who is she to judge? But very interesting personal conundrum there while she deals with her alien psychology professor, who then she gets him to revert back to normal, and that ends that. So this Richard guy shows back up at the end, and this is an interesting serial sequence. You could tell they did not intend on ending the series here whatsoever, because it ends on this cliffhanger where he just kisses her, and you're supposed to like wonder what happens with her, and I suppose we were supposed to get another issue resolving that. And then I would have liked to known what happened with her boyfriend, where he's been disappearing to this entire time. I'm sure there was an interesting story there also. Maybe I'll try to talk to Paul Kupperberg and see if he will come stream and tell me what he intended for the end of this, just because I'm curious on that. Good stuff. And here it is. They suspend at this dramatic moment. We reluctantly suspend publication of Supergirl. In the near future, we hope to announce the reappearance of the Maid of Steel in a new magazine. Nope. Meanwhile, you can look forward to July to seeing Supergirl at your movie theater. Very weird that they canceled and ended Supergirl in the comics right as a movie's coming out. It just seems like a bad idea from DC. But we know what's coming in Crisis for those of us who are following along, which is right about this time also. And that really changes the DC universe forever. So very interesting stuff. Another long one here. I obviously very much enjoyed this. This is a 9 out of 10. This is really good comic storytelling, and I'm very happy to have read this series. So hit that like and subscribe button. Leave a comment down below if you've read it, and I will be back soon.